The courtroom had heard every kind of sound over the years: raised voices, whispered confessions, muffled sobs, even laughter that came at the wrong time. But on that morning, silence ruled with a strange authority, pressing down on everyone like a held breath that refused to be released. Sunlight crept through the tall, narrow windows, cutting pale lines across the polished wooden floor. Dust floated lazily in those beams, untouched, unnoticed. The seal of the court loomed behind the judge's bench, stern and immovable, as if it had already made up its mind long before anyone spoke. This was supposed to be routine. Another day, another case, another decision that would change lives. At the center of the room stood Officer Daniel Reeves, spine straight, jaw clenched so tight it ached. His uniform was crisp, pressed within an inch of perfection, but his hands betrayed him, one resting on the leather leash, the other flexing slightly, as if preparing for impact. Beside him sat Rex, a full-grown German shepherd, powerful and disciplined, his posture flawless. Rex's ears were forward, eyes alert but calm, scanning the room the way he'd been trained to do 1,000 times before. His breathing was steady, controlled, professional. To the jury, Rex looked like exactly what he was supposed to be: a loyal K-9 officer, neutral and obedient. But Daniel knew better. Rex remembered. This case had dragged on for months, tearing through police departments, legal offices, and public opinion alike. A traffic stop, a suspect who refused to comply, conflicting reports, body cameras that conveniently failed at critical moments, and Rex, deployed into the chaos, following commands he trusted without question. What happened next depended on who you asked. Some said Rex acted appropriately. Others said the force was excessive. Everyone agreed on one thing: Rex couldn't tell his side of the story. So humans did it for him. The prosecution painted a picture of control and protocol. The defense countered with allegations of fear and brutality. Experts, diagrams were shown, videos were paused, replayed, dissected frame by frame. Still, doubt hung in the air. And doubt was dangerous. On the back benches of the courtroom, Carter sat perched on her mother's lap, her small fingers gripping the edge of her pink sweater. Her legs swung gently, not touching the floor. To her, the courtroom felt enormous, too big, too loud, too serious. Her mother, Sarah, shifted uncomfortably, adjusting weight. She hadn't wanted to bring her daughter, but there was no one else, and she couldn't afford to miss today. Today mattered. Attention wandered at first, at the shiny badge on the bailiff's chest, at the echo of footsteps, at the way voices sounded bigger in this room. But then the dog entered. Rex. The moment he stepped through the side door, something changed. Swinging legs went still. Her chatter faded. Her eyes locked onto Rex with an intensity that didn't match her age. Sarah noticed it and frowned. "Sweetie, look at Mommy." "Didn't." Her gaze followed Rex as he sat beside Officer Reeves. She leaned forward slightly, her brow furrowing in concentration, as if she were trying to remember something she couldn't quite name. Rex felt it. Years of training had sharpened his awareness of human behavior, especially unpredictable movements. His ears flicked once. His eyes shifted, just briefly, toward the back of the courtroom. They met. The connection was instant and unsettling. Rex didn't growl, didn't bark, didn't tense. Instead, his tail stilled. Officer Reeves felt the subtle change through the leash. His eyes followed Rex's line of sight until he spotted the child staring openly at them. A toddler, Reeves thought, just a kid. Still, his unease grew. The defense attorney continued speaking, voice smooth and practiced. "Officer Reeves, isn't it true that your dog has been trained to respond aggressively under high-stress situations?" "Yes," Reeves answered evenly, "as any K-9 officer is." "And isn't it also true that once deployed, You have limited ability to immediately call him off. That depends on the circumstances. Words flew back and forth, sharp and deliberate. The jury watched closely. The judge listened, expression unreadable. But wasn't listening. She was remembering. Her small fingers tightened, then loosened. Her lips parted slightly as her eyes traced the scars on Rex's muzzle, old marks, barely visible beneath his fur. Her chest rose and fell a little faster. Sarah felt it. A strange tension ran through her daughter's body. She whispered urgently, "Sit still, okay?" Slid down from her lap. Gasps erupted softly across the gallery. Before Sarah could grab her, stood on the bench, wobbling slightly but determined. Her arm lifted, slow and deliberate, as if guided by something older than her 3 years. She pointed, straight at Rex. The courtroom shifted. The bailiff took a step forward. The defense attorney stopped mid-question. Officer Reeves felt his pulse slam in his ears. The judge opened his mouth to reprimand. Then spoke. Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't shaky. It wasn't playful. It was clear. Certain. 2 words escaped her lips, words that didn't belong to a child who could barely tie her shoes. The effect was immediate. Officer Reeves froze, blood draining from his face. Rex's ears flattened slightly as a low sound vibrated in his chest. Not a growl, not a bark, but something closer to recognition. The judge's gavel hovered in the air, forgotten. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, like a sudden gust of wind. Sarah felt her heart drop into her stomach. She whispered, terrified now, "What did you say?" Didn't answer her. She didn't look away. She kept pointing at the police dog, eyes wide, unblinking, like she was seeing something no one else could. The judge leaned forward slowly, his voice cautious. "Young lady, can you repeat that?" Rex shifted his weight. Just enough. Officer Reeves tightened his grip on the leash, a chill crawling up his spine. Because those 2 words weren't random. They weren't innocent. They sounded like recognition. And in that moment, every person in the courtroom felt it. An invisible line had been crossed. Something buried had been touched. And whatever had just said was about to change everything. For 3 full seconds, no one moved. Not the judge. Not the lawyers. Not the jurors frozen in their seats. Even the air inside the courtroom seemed to stop. His arm remained outstretched, her tiny finger unwavering as it pointed at the German shepherd sitting beside Officer Reeves. Her face showed no fear, no confusion, only a strange seriousness that felt painfully out of place on a 3-year-old. Officer Reeves felt his heartbeat pounding against his ribs. His mind raced backward through years of training, dozens of cases, countless deployments. He replayed commands, locations, faces. And then those 2 words echoed again in his head. He hurt. That was what she had said. Not doggy. Not bad dog. Not scary. He hurt. A murmur began to ripple through the courtroom, low and disbelieving. The judge leaned forward, his brows knitting together. "Order," he said quietly, but his voice lacked its usual authority. He cleared his throat. "Officer Reeves, do you need a moment?" Reeves swallowed. "No, Your Honor." But his body betrayed him. His hand tightened around the leash, knuckles whitening. Rex shifted again, nails clicking softly against the polished floor. Finally lowered her arm. Sarah pulled her daughter back onto her lap, her own hands shaking now. "I'm so sorry," she whispered frantically. She doesn't know what she's saying." But shook her head. "No," she said softly, "he hurt." Several jurors exchanged uneasy glances. The defense attorney was the first to recover. He straightened, eyes lighting up with something sharp and dangerous. "Your Honor," he said carefully, The court just heard a spontaneous statement from a minor witness. The prosecutor shot to her feet. Objection. This is a toddler. She is not a witness. The judge raised a hand, trying to regain control. Everyone sit down now. Rex let out a slow breath. Daniel Reeves felt it like a warning. Dogs didn't remember the way humans did. Not in words, not in pictures, but Rex remembered sensations, smells, sounds, fear. And right now, something was pressing against the back of his mind, something he hadn't felt since that night. The night everything went wrong. Watched Rex closely, her head tilting slightly as if listening to something only she could hear. Her eyes filled, not with tears, but with emotion too big for her small body. He cried, she added quietly. The courtroom erupted. What did she say? Did you hear that? Jesus. The judge slammed the gavel, the crack echoing like a gunshot. Order. Silence fell again, but this time it was fractured, trembling. Sarah clutched tightly. Baby, stop talking, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please. Frowned, confused now. But he did, she insisted, pointing again, but this time not at Rex's face. She pointed at the scars along his muzzle. Officer Reeves felt the blood drain from his face. Those scars weren't in any report. They were old, half hidden beneath fur. Most people never noticed them. They came from a struggle years earlier. Another deployment, another suspect, another mess quietly buried by paperwork and time. No one outside the unit knew. No one except Rex. The prosecutor approached the bench, whispering urgently. The defense attorney followed, matching her intensity. The judge listened, jaw tight, eyes flicking occasionally toward the child. Rex's breathing quickened. Daniel felt it through the leash, felt the subtle tremor running through his partner's body. Rex wasn't aggressive. He wasn't panicking. He was stressed. The judge finally spoke. We are calling a brief recess. Gasps and whispers filled the room as people stood. Jurors leaned toward one another, voices hushed but urgent. Phones were already coming out despite warnings. Officer Reeves remained where he was. Rex sat, but his posture had changed. His head was lower now, eyes no longer scanning the room but fixed on. Stared back. Sarah noticed it and turned pale. Why is he looking at her like that? She whispered. Daniel wanted to answer. He wanted to say Rex was just a dog, that this was coincidence, that children say strange things. But deep down he knew better. Because Rex didn't look at the way he looked at suspects. He looked at her the way he looked at people who understood. The bailiff approached carefully. Officer, we're going to escort the child and her mother outside. Protested softly as Sarah lifted her. I didn't mean to make him sad. Sad? The word struck Daniel like a blow. As they walked past, turned her head one last time toward Rex. I remember, she said. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Remember what? The doors closed behind them, leaving the courtroom buzzing with shock and confusion. The judge removed his glasses and rubbed his temples. We will resume in 15 minutes, he said, voice strained. And when we do, we are addressing this development. Officer Reeves knelt beside Rex, lowering his voice. Easy, boy, easy. Rex didn't respond the way he usually did. Instead, he leaned slightly into Daniel's hand, a quiet whimper escaping his throat. That sound, small, broken, sent Daniel's thoughts spiraling back to the night of the traffic stop. The shouting, the flashing lights, the command he gave too late. He had told himself Rex was fine, that dogs didn't carry guilt. But now he wasn't so sure. Outside the courtroom, Sarah crouched in the hallway trying to calm. Sweetheart, she whispered, tears streaming freely now. How do you know that dog? Blinked, her confidence fading into something softer. I saw him. Sarah's chest tightened. Where, baby? Looked down at her shoes. In the dark, she said. Back inside, Officer Reeves stared at Rex, his stomach sinking. Because there had only been one time Rex had cried in the dark. And no one was supposed to know about it. The hallway outside the courtroom was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed louder now, echoing off the walls, bouncing into the small space where Sarah crouched beside. She tried to calm her daughter, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, but eyes were wide, not afraid, not playful, but locked into something far older than her 3 years. Sarah whispered, voice trembling, "You didn't see anything. You shouldn't know about him." Shook her head slowly, her small fingers tracing the edge of her mother's sleeve. "I did," she insisted. "I saw him in the dark. He was scared." Sarah's breath caught. She remembered the first time Rex had ever come into their lives, not through adoption, not through her father's old police contacts, but through a fleeting story on the news. A K-9 had been injured during a raid months ago. Nothing ever said he was scared. Nothing ever said he cried. And yet, her daughter's words made the memory of that news segment suddenly horrifyingly clear. Meanwhile, back inside the courtroom, Officer Reeves sat beside Rex, his hand resting lightly on the dog's massive shoulder. The German shepherd's amber eyes were fixed on the closed doors through which her mother had just disappeared. He could feel the tension vibrating through Rex's body, the subtle tremor in his muscles, the tiny quiver of his tail. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was recognition. Recognition of what? Reeves couldn't shake the memory of that night, the night the traffic stop had escalated into chaos. The suspect had resisted arrest, the lights had flashed, commands had been given, and somewhere in the confusion Rex had cried, an unusual sound for a police dog, one that had never been recorded, never been acknowledged. No human had seen it, no officer had reported it. It was something buried, a secret carried only by the dog. And now somehow, a child had remembered it. The courtroom remained suspended in a tense limbo as the clerk called for a brief recess. Jurors whispered to one another, their eyes wide with disbelief. Phones were pressed against ears, snippets of the story already racing through social media. 3-year-old points at police dog, says he hurt. The headline alone was enough to ignite a wildfire of speculation, yet no one knew what it truly meant. Outside's voice broke the hallway silence again. "Mommy, I don't know why I know, but I do." Sarah's hands shook as she tried to hold her daughter steady. "Baby, it's okay. Sometimes kids see things differently." But she knew her words were hollow. This wasn't normal. Children didn't remember trauma that had happened to others, especially not through a dog, not like this. Tilted her head. "He cried, I saw his eyes. They were big and lonely." Sarah swallowed hard. Her mind spun, trying to reconcile what her daughter was saying with the life she thought she knew. And yet the clarity in his voice was undeniable. Not fear, not imagination, truth. Back in the courtroom, Officer Reeves could no longer deny the invisible thread pulling at his conscience. He crouched lower beside Rex, speaking softly. "Rex, do you remember that night?" His voice trembled. "Do you remember what happened?" Rex pressed closer, letting out another soft whine. The sound was low, almost mournful, and it reverberated in Reeves' chest like a bell tolling a warning. The dog's eyes didn't flick toward him this time. They were fixed on the door through which had disappeared. It was as if the dog knew something only a child could reveal. Meanwhile, whispers in the courtroom grew louder. The jury had returned from recess, but the tension remained thick, electric. The judge's gavel finally fell, but it barely pierced the silence. "We will proceed," he said, voice tight, "and we will address this unprecedented testimony." The prosecution tried to regain control. "Your Honor, the child's statements, while unusual, do not constitute evidence." But their words felt weak, hollow, like paper in a hurricane. Everyone in the room sensed that something far beyond legal definitions had entered the space. Once brought back into the courtroom was calmer now. She clutched her mother's hand tightly, her small eyes scanning the room until they found Rex. And in that instant, A collective chill ran down every spine. She stepped forward slightly, but her gaze remained locked on the dog. Her voice, soft but unwavering, spoke once more. He wasn't bad. He was scared. The courtroom fell silent again. Officer Reeves felt a shiver trace his spine. That dog had never been scared in front of anyone except during that one chaotic night, an event that no one was supposed to remember, especially a child who was only 3. Yet here she was, speaking with certainty, recounting something that had been long buried in shadows. The defense attorney moved with sudden urgency. "Your Honor, I request a recess. We need to consider this child's statements. It's extraordinary, unprecedented." The judge nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Very well. Court is adjourned for 10 minutes. As the room emptied slightly, whispers continuing like ripples across water, Daniel Reeves remained crouched beside Rex. "I've never heard you make a sound like that," he murmured. "Not to me, not to anyone." Rex's ears twitched, and he let out a slow breath. Then his gaze fixed once again on. Outside's small voice was barely audible over the chatter. "Mommy, he remembers me." Sarah froze. "Remembers you? What are you talking about?" Looked up, eyes wide and earnest. "He remembers the dark, he remembers the night." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "Baby, no one's supposed to know about that night." Shrugged as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "I saw him, I know." Back inside the courtroom, Officer Reeves finally stood, his face pale. He stared at Rex, whose body was taut, every muscle coiled like a spring. Something was coming. Something that neither man nor dog could fully understand yet, but's words had triggered it. And then it hit him. Rex hadn't just been scared that night. He had been hurt, physically, yes, but emotionally too. Something had left a mark on him, something no one had acknowledged. And now, through a child, that mark was surfacing in ways Reeves had never imagined. The jurors watched in tense silence as Reeves knelt again, whispering to Rex, Stay calm, boy, we'll get through this." But neither of them believed it, not really. His tiny voice echoed in Reeves' mind as he remembered he hurt. He cried, "I saw him." The clock ticked, slow and deliberate. The courtroom felt suffocating. Every eye was on the dog. Every thought wondered what it seen. Every heartbeat sensed that what happened next could change everything. Because the night of chaos, the hidden cries, the secrets buried in police files, had seen it. And through her eyes, the truth was about to resurface. Rex whined softly, just enough to make Reeves flinch. And 3 years old whispered again, almost to herself, "He's waiting." The courtroom had no idea what those words meant, but Daniel Reeves did. Because whatever had seen, whatever Rex remembered, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The courtroom emptied slowly, the echoes of whispered speculation bouncing off the polished wooden walls. Jurors lingered in their seats for a moment, hesitant to leave, their minds replaying the words of a 3-year-old. "He hurt. He cried, I saw him. He's waiting." Inside, Officer Daniel Reeves knelt beside Rex. The dog's massive body trembled ever so slightly, subtle enough that only a trained officer could detect it. The leash slack in Reeves' hand felt heavy, like holding a chain tethered not to a dog, but to a memory he had long tried to forget. Reeves rubbed a hand over Rex's neck, murmuring softly, I didn't think anyone could see that, not even you." Rex tilted his head, ears twitching, eyes locked on the hallway wherein Sarah had disappeared moments ago. It wasn't fear. It wasn't aggression. It was anticipation, a tense, fragile awareness that something long buried was about to surface. Reeves' mind drifted backward. He closed his eyes, letting the images from months ago crash into him like cold waves. It had been a rainy night, the kind where water streamed down the streets in silver sheets, reflecting the red and blue of emergency lights. Reeves had been called for a routine traffic stop, but when he arrived, the situation spiraled immediately. The suspect, A man with a history of violence had resisted arrest violently. There were shouts, a struggle, and somewhere in the chaos, Rex had been sent in. The dog's training was clear. Neutralize the threat, protect the handler, and never hesitate. Reeves had believed that, until Rex whined. Not a growl, not a bark. A small, almost human sound, a sound of confusion, fear, and something else's sorrow. Reeves had frozen. He had seen it with his own eyes but hadn't reported it. It was never in the files. No one had known. The moment passed. Commands were given. The suspect was subdued. Life went on. But something had changed in Rex that night. Something Reeves had never acknowledged, never understood. And now a 3-year-old was nomming it. Back in the hallway, Sarah tried to calm. "Sweetheart, honey, it's okay," she said, her voice shaking. "You don't need to talk about it anymore." Shook her head slowly. "I do," she said softly. "I saw him cry. He didn't want to hurt anyone." Sarah froze. "What are you talking about?" His gaze was distant, fixed on something she alone could see. "It was dark. I followed him." Sarah's pulse raced, followed him. Nodded, eyes wide, tiny hands clasped together. He was alone. He looked scared. His eyes, they were big, and he wanted someone to help him. I helped him. Sarah felt her stomach twist. "You were a baby then." "I know," said simply, "but I saw him, I remember." Her words were calm, almost matter-of-fact, but they carried a weight no adult could dismiss. Inside the courtroom, Reeves stood and stared at Rex. The dog's gaze was locked on the doors, muscles coiled. Reeves whispered almost to himself, could she really remember? He glanced at the jury, the prosecutor, and the defense attorney, who were all whispering furiously among themselves. Social media had already started buzzing outside the building, reporters snapping photos, capturing every word had spoken. But Reeves didn't care about that. He cared about what the dog was feeling, what had just revealed, and the secret night that had been hidden for so long. Something was coming. He knew it instinctively. Later, in a private conference room, Reeves and his commanding officer discussed the child's statements. The officer's face was grim. "Daniel, are you telling me that a toddler just described your K9 crying months ago?" Reeves nodded slowly, words caught in his throat. "Yes, she didn't just describe it, she remembered it, and she said she helped him." The commanding officer raised an eyebrow. "Helped him? How? She's 3. "I don't know," Reeves admitted. "I don't know how, but whatever she saw, it affected Rex." Reeves returned to the courtroom, his mind racing with questions that had no answers. When he entered, the jurors were restless, whispers like a storm, and then appeared again, small hand in her mother, walking confidently toward Rex. The room went silent as she stopped a few feet away, eyes wide but calm. "He remembers me," she said softly. "He's been waiting for me." Reeves' heart pounded. He crouched slightly, leash in hand. "Rex, stay calm," he whispered. But the dog was no longer entirely calm. Every muscle was coiled. Every sense was on alert. Lifted her finger slightly. "You hurt," she said. "You were scared and you were alone, but I helped you." The jurors whispered nervously. The judge, struggling to maintain composure, called for order. "Ma'am, young lady, what exactly do you mean by that?" Looked at him directly, voice unwavering. "He's telling me," she said, gesturing toward Rex. "He remembers the dark. He remembers the bad night. I told him it would be okay." A collective shiver ran through the courtroom. The defense attorney leaned forward suddenly. "Your Honor, I request. No, I demand a pause. This is extraordinary. Something is happening here that transcends normal testimony." The judge, jaw tight, motioned for recess. But Reeves knew deep down this wasn't something that could be paused or postponed. Because what had awakened in Rex, it wasn't just memory. It was acknowledgement. And what he acknowledged was terrifying. Reeves thought back to the night again, heart sinking. The suspect had fought fiercely. The traffic stop had spiraled out of control in minutes. Rex had been deployed to subdue, but in the chaos something happened. Something subtle, something no one saw. He had whined, looked around frantically, and hesitated. That hesitation could have cost lives. But there was another moment. Something Reeves had buried even deeper. A fleeting glimpse, a shadow, a small figure in the darkness, barely noticeable but present. Someone or something witnessing it. He had assumed, he imagined it. But now's words confirmed it. That shadow had been real. That child had been there. That child had seen the unrecorded truth. Rex shifted, low whine escaping again. Reeves swallowed hard. I don't know what to do, he whispered. But whatever it is, it's not over. Back in the courtroom, straightened, small chest rising with confidence. He's not bad, she said again. He just needed me. The prosecutor leaned forward, incredulous. Ma'am, what exactly do you mean he needed you? Didn't answer. She didn't have to. The room understood, even if they didn't want to admit it, that something extraordinary was happening. A 3-year-old child and a police dog shared a memory no one else could access. Reeves looked at Rex, feeling the bond in a way he never had before. He had trained dogs for years. He had seen courage, loyalty, and intelligence. But he had never seen a dog connect with a human this way, a memory transmitted across time, trauma, and comprehension. And then whispered, almost to herself, I'll never let him be alone again. The courtroom went utterly silent. Even the judge, trying to maintain order, felt a chill run down his spine. Something about the child's tone, the certainty, the calm, the knowledge, made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Reeves clenched his jaw. He had thought this case was about legal technicalities, witness testimonies, and procedural arguments. He was wrong. It was about truth, something primal, something buried in the dark, and only a child could retrieve it. And as reached a tiny hand toward Rex again, the dog's amber eyes met hers fully, wholly, without hesitation. They remembered each other. And no one in the courtroom, not the jury, not the attorneys, not the judge, was prepared for what came next. Because the night in the dark, the one no one had acknowledged, was about to come alive again. Rain pelted the asphalt like sharp needles, turning the streets into mirrors of flashing red and blue. Officer Daniel Reeves gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as the car skidded slightly on the wet pavement. Every second felt stretched, like the world had slowed down to test him. He wasn't prepared for the chaos that awaited. The call had been routine, a traffic stop, but routine had a way of exploding into chaos. Reeves had arrived to find the suspect resisting violently, flailing, screaming, threatening. The lights of his patrol car reflected off the suspect's rain-soaked face, revealing a mix of panic and rage. Reeves barked commands, but in the roar of rain and adrenaline, the words barely carried. He had released Rex. The German Shepherd had lunged into action, trained instincts kicking in. But then, a sound that no handler expected. A whine. Soft, almost inaudible beneath the rain, the shouts, and the tires squealing on wet asphalt. Reeves had stopped in his tracks. Rex had never whined like that, not in training, not in any real deployment, not ever. His amber eyes, wide and frantic, scanned the darkness. He froze, trembling ever so slightly, as if searching for someone, something. And then Reeves saw it, a shadow, barely visible in the dim glow of streetlights. A small figure standing at the edge of the street, half hidden behind a parked car. A child. Impossible. The streets had been empty. No one should have been there. No child should have been exposed to this danger. And yet there she was, tiny, silent, watching, eyes wide, unblinking, taking in every detail. Reeves didn't know her name. He didn't know she existed. But somehow she was there. Rex's whine grew louder, a shiver running through his massive body. He took a hesitant step backward, not away from the suspect, but toward the child. Reeves called for him to focus. Rex, down, focus. But the dog didn't listen. His gaze was locked on, ears forward, body coiled with tension. Not aggression, not fear, but recognition. Something primal, something older than training or commands. And then the suspect lunged again. Rex responded instantly, teeth bared, muscles taut. The struggle escalated violently, rain soaking everything, flashes of lightning illuminating the chaos. But even amid the chaos stepped forward, small, fearless, impossibly precise. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She walked directly toward Rex, holding out tiny hands, not to touch him but to acknowledge him, to calm him. Reeves had no words for what he saw. Rex paused. The whine became a small bark and the tension in the dog's body eased slightly. Reeves watched in disbelief. The child, this tiny human, had managed something he hadn't, something no handler could ever teach. Whispered barely audible over the storm, "It's okay, I'm here, I'm here." Rex's ears flattened, muscles trembling. He whimpered softly, leaning slightly into the reassurance. And then, for a fleeting moment, his focus wavered from the suspect entirely. Reeves had taken action, but in that instant he realized Rex wasn't just reacting to commands or danger. He was remembering fear, remembering pain, and someone impossibly small, had recognized it. The struggle ended quickly after that, but not without cost. Rex had been injured, minor, nothing life-threatening, but enough to leave scars. Scars that were hidden beneath his fur, invisible to casual observers. Scars that told a story no report would record. Reeves had helped the suspect into the patrol car. He had calmed Rex. He had written the reports, and in every version, in every official recounting, there was no child. There was no soft voice whispering, "It's okay, I'm here." It had been buried, dismissed as impossible. Back in the courtroom, Reeves' thoughts drifted to, sitting now quietly beside her mother. She was small, delicate, but something in her posture betrayed her understanding of that night. "She remembers," Reeves murmured to himself. "She remembers it all." Rex's eyes locked on again, amber glowing with an intensity Reeves had never seen before. The dog's body quivered, low whine escaping his throat. Not fear, not aggression, recognition, relief, pain, memory, all tangled together in a silent language only they could share. His tiny hand reached out, finger pointing at the scars along Rex's muzzle. "You hurt," she said softly. "I saw it." The courtroom went silent. Even the judge, struggling to maintain authority, felt a shiver run down his spine. He was a man trained to weigh evidence, to manage procedure, to maintain decorum. None of that mattered now. A 3-year-old had just described trauma hidden in plain sight, trauma no human had documented. The defense attorney leaned forward, voice tight with curiosity and a hint of fear. "Your Honor, this is extraordinary. I've never seen anything like this." Words, simple yet profound, echoed through the courtroom. "He's not bad, he just needed someone to help him." And everyone understood in that instant that what she said was true. Not legally, not technically, but viscerally, emotionally, truth that could not be. Outside the courtroom, Sarah tried to process her daughter's statements. "How did you know?" she asked, voice breaking. "How did you see him?" Tilted her head. "I don't know," she said. "I just did, I followed him, I knew he was alone, I had to help." Sarah's heart pounded. She had raised her daughter to be careful, to avoid danger. Yet here was a tiny human who had walked straight into it, who had comforted a traumatized animal in ways no adult could comprehend. Inside, Reeves remained kneeling beside Rex, whispering softly, "I don't know what to do with this, with her, but I'll figure it out." Rex's gaze didn't waver. It was anchored on, locked in a silent understanding. And in that instant, Reeves realized the truth, had not just remembered the night. She had experienced it in a way that transcended normal understanding. She had seen the fear, the isolation, the pain, and she had bridged the gap. No one else in the courtroom understood this. No one else could, but Daniel Reeves did, and Rex did. And now, the world outside this room was about to be forced to acknowledge something extraordinary. Because the night in the dark, the one no one had ever spoken of, was no longer a secret. And the child who had seen it was about to become the key to the truth. The courtroom had changed. It wasn't the polished wood, the rows of seats, or the hum of fluorescent lights that made it feel different. It was the air itself, thick with expectation, trembling as if it knew something extraordinary was about to happen. Officer Daniel Reeves remained crouched beside Rex, hands lightly gripping the leash, yet careful not to constrain the dog's movements. The German shepherd's amber eyes were fixed on the small girl now standing again, her mother close behind, hand hovering near her shoulder but not touching. His gaze pierced the courtroom, scanning the faces of strangers, the judge, the jurors, and finally landing back on Rex. "He remembers me," whispered, just loud enough for Reeves to hear. A low hum of murmurs traveled through the gallery. Phones were lifted, whispers spread like wildfire. Social media alerts were already buzzing with snippets of what had happened. 3-year-old claims to communicate with police dog, one reporter typed rapidly. Toddler witnesses dog's hidden trauma. Another headline flashed in someone's mind. Child and K9 share secret only they know. But no headline could capture the intensity of this moment. Stepped closer to Rex. The dog's body tensed but did not move away. Reeves' heart raced. Years of handling K9 units had never prepared him for this. The dog wasn't acting out of fear or aggression. He wasn't reacting to commands. He was waiting. For the child. The judge, struggling to maintain authority, cleared his throat. "Young lady, ma'am, what exactly do you mean by 'he remembers you'?" His voice was firm, yet there was an undeniable edge of uncertainty. Looked up at him, eyes wide and unwavering. "He remembers the night," she said. Her voice carried the weight of certainty no 3-year-old should possess. "The dark. He was scared. He hurt. I told him it would be okay." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Even the defense attorney, who had been preparing to capitalize on this impossible testimony, froze mid-sentence. The prosecutor's note slipped from her hands, and jurors leaned forward, captivated by a phenomenon they could not explain. Reeves knelt lower, murmuring softly to Rex, "Easy, boy, easy." The leash felt heavier than ever. His partner, trained and disciplined, began to tremble subtly, muscles coiled like a spring ready to release. Reeves had seen this tension before, but never like this. Never paired with recognition, memory, and awe. Raised her tiny hand again, pointing deliberately at the scars along Rex's muzzle. "You hurt," she said, softly but firmly. "I saw it. I helped you." The murmurs grew louder. People exchanged looks of disbelief, uncertainty, and unease. A few jurors even covered their mouths in shock. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order, order in the court." The sound cracked through the air, but it barely dented the tension. Reeves realized that no gavel could silence what had been awakened. Rex let out a low, almost mournful whine. His head lowered slightly, and Reeves felt the subtle tremor in his chest, the dog's body telling a story his mouth could not. And then whispered again, nearly inaudible, "You're not alone anymore." That simple statement shifted something in the courtroom. The dog's gaze softened, muscles relaxing imperceptibly, as if he had understood her words in a way no human could. Reeves' chest tightened. He had never seen Rex respond with this level of comprehension. Something extraordinary was unfolding, and the courtroom had become a silent witness to it. Outside the gallery, whispers turned into speculation. Social media feeds were alive with comments, shares, and clips of pointing at Rex. Headlines screamed, "Toddler reveals police dog's secret trauma and child and canine share unthinkable connection." But inside, Reeves knew it was bigger than news, bigger than headlines. This was a bond forged in the darkness of trauma, a memory shared across species, recognized by a child too young to understand why. Back in the courtroom, the defense attorney leaned forward. "Your Honor, may I request a recess?" This, this is beyond precedent. The child's statements, her observations, they are extraordinary. They must be considered carefully. The judge nodded slowly, acknowledging the request. Very well, we will recess for 15 minutes, and when we resume, we will address the child's statements directly. But the break did nothing to calm the tension. Reeves stayed crouched beside Rex, murmuring words of reassurance. Yet he knew the dog had been awakened in a way that could not be undone, had not just remembered, she had connected. And that connection had surfaced something buried deep in Rex's memory, a truth no human testimony could replace. Mother Sarah knelt beside her daughter outside the courtroom. "Honey, you don't have to do this," she whispered. "I know you're trying to help, but it's dangerous." Shook her head. "I have to," she said simply. "He remembers me, he waited for me, I can help him." Sarah's throat tightened. There was no arguing with that conviction. No parent could override the certainty of a child who had witnessed what should have been impossible. When the court reconvened, stepped back into the room, standing boldly in front of the jury, Reeves could see the slight trembling in Rex's body, the subtle whine escaping his throat. The German shepherd's amber eyes locked with. Time seemed to stretch, the courtroom suspended in a moment of shared understanding. His voice, small yet commanding, carried across the room. "He remembers everything. The dark, the pain, the fear, but he's brave now. I helped him." The effect was instantaneous. Jurors leaned forward, captivated. Reporters scribbled notes, unable to process the extraordinary event in real time. And Reeves felt something shift in Rex. The dog's body relaxed slightly, muscles uncoiling. He lowered his head in a gesture of trust and recognition. Reeves whispered, barely audible, I didn't think anyone could understand you. Not like this." Tilted her head, eyes wide and serious. "I understand. He's not bad, he just needed someone." The judge, pale and wide-eyed, struggled to regain control. "Order. Let's proceed with the trial. But we will take note of the child's testimony in a very careful, measured way." The prosecutor's hand trembled slightly as she adjusted her papers. "Your Honor, this is highly unusual, extraordinary. We need to approach this carefully." The defense attorney's eyes gleamed. "Careful, yes, but this could change everything." Rex whined again softly, just enough to make Reeves flinch. The sound wasn't fear, it was acknowledgement, recognition, connection. Stepped closer, her tiny hand hovered near Rex's muzzle. "You're not alone," she whispered. "I'm here." And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. Rex's body shivered, then relaxed fully. His eyes softened. Every muscle that had been coiled in tension for months, ever since that night in the dark, loosened. The dog exhaled slowly, almost as if he were releasing a weight long carried alone. Reeves felt tears prick his eyes. He had trained dogs for years. He had seen fear, aggression, loyalty, courage, but he had never witnessed anything like this. Never a child bridging the gap between human and animal memory, trauma and trust. The courtroom held its breath. No one could deny the bond, the understanding, the truth displayed before them. A child of 3 had reminded a dog that he was no longer alone. And in that moment, Reeves understood. This trial, this case, this day was no longer just about legal arguments. It was about something far deeper, something primal, something extraordinary. Because the night in the dark, the trauma, the fear, the pain that no human had acknowledged, was now recognized, remembered, and healed, in a way no one could have expected. But outside the courtroom, and in the shadows of that rain-soaked night, dangers lingered. Secrets remained buried, and not everyone wanted the truth to surface. And Reeves knew this was only the beginning. The courtroom air felt electric, like static before a storm. Every eye was on the tiny girl and the massive German shepherd. Stood with her tiny hands clenched at her sides, her wide eyes unwavering, while Rex sat beside Officer Reeves, his amber gaze fixed on her with a depth no one in the room could fully comprehend. Daniel Reeves' heart pounded. Every instinct screamed that this moment was beyond anything he had ever experienced in years of law enforcement. He had trained dogs to respond to commands, to follow, to fight, to protect. But this was something he could not control. This was something older, deeper, something primal. Soft voice broke the tense silence. "He's telling me. He's remembering everything." Whispers erupted immediately, a low tide that quickly swelled into a roar. Jurors leaned forward in disbelief. Reporters scrambled, cameras flashing. Even the judge, who had spent decades commanding order, froze mid-gavel, his eyes wide. The defense attorney was the first to seize the moment. "Your Honor, the child, her observations are extraordinary. This dog, this K9, has been carrying trauma that no human report has acknowledged, and this child has unlocked it. She has provided testimony in a way that defies logic but cannot be ignored." The prosecutor's jaw tightened. "Objection! The child cannot testify to the dog's internal state. This is inadmissible. This is preposterous." The judge slammed the gavel with unusual force, but the sound barely pierced the tension. "Order! All of you sit down." His eyes flicked nervously toward, then to Rex. "We will proceed, but this child's statements are to be considered with extreme care." However, did not flinch. She pointed directly at Rex's muzzle, at the scars that no one had ever noticed. "You hurt," she said softly, definitively. "I saw it, he hurt." The words hung in the air. Rex shivered slightly, almost imperceptibly, and whined. Reeves' chest tightened. The dog's response wasn't fear, it wasn't defiance, it was recognition and grief. Reeves swallowed hard, gripping the leash. "Stay calm, boy, easy." But he knew he was powerless, had reached something within Rex that no command, no restraint, no training could contain. The courtroom leaned in. A juror whispered, Is that possible?" "Yes," another said quietly, voice trembling. I think it is." Mother Sarah tried to kneel beside her daughter to whisper comfort but held up a hand. "He remembers," she said, "and now he's telling me everything." Suddenly Rex shifted. The dog stood slowly, muscles rippling under his thick fur, his eyes never left. Then, as if compelled by something beyond ordinary understanding, he moved a single step toward her. The jurors gasped. Reeves felt the leash vibrate in his hand. He could feel the dog's tension, the memory coursing through him, and he dared not pull back. Reached out, tiny hand brushing Rex's muzzle. The room went utterly silent. No one breathed. Even the air seemed to hold its tension. Then she whispered, barely audible, "I know now, I know what happened." The courtroom collectively leaned in. Reeves' mind raced back to that rainy night. The suspect had resisted arrest violently. Rex had been deployed. The dog had cried, whined, hesitated. And Reeves had seen it all, the moment when Rex's instincts and his own commands collided, leaving a hidden mark of trauma. And now, a 3-year-old was articulating it in a way no one could have imagined. "She's telling the truth," Reeves muttered under his breath. Straightened. He didn't want to hurt anyone, he just didn't know how, and no one helped him, but I did. Reeves felt his chest tighten. He had always trusted Rex implicitly. He had never doubted the dog's loyalty or courage. But now, witnessing the bond, the recognition, the memory surfacing through a child's voice, he realized there was so much he had not understood. The defense attorney stepped forward, voice rising with urgency. "Your Honor, the child's testimony may be the only evidence that truly reflects what happened that night. The dog's reactions, the scars on him, the fear he experienced, this child has articulated it. She has revealed the unreported truth." The prosecutor shook her head. "This is extraordinary, yes, but it's inadmissible. We cannot allow speculation, no matter how compelling it seems, to override evidence, reports, and protocol." The judge's hands hovered over the gavel. He was torn. Every fiber of his being recognized the absurdity, but no one could deny the tension in the courtroom, the way the dog responded, the certainty in the child's eyes. Pointed again at Rex's scars. He needs to be seen. He needs to be understood. The dog's whine grew slightly, low and mournful. Reeves felt it deep in his chest. This was more than obedience, more than instinct. This was recognition of justice in a form that humans could barely comprehend. A juror whispered, "It's like she's talking for him." "Yes," another replied, "she's telling his story." Rex lowered his head slightly, muscles relaxing, eyes still locked with. He wasn't just reacting. He was communicating. A memory long buried was being acknowledged in a language no one else could understand. The room held its collective breath. Reeves, chest tight, whispered softly, "I don't know if anyone else can hear him, boy, but I hear you." Knelt slightly, tiny hands resting on Rex's massive shoulders. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're not alone anymore. I'm here. I've been here all along." At that moment, something shifted. The tension in Rex's body melted almost completely. He exhaled slowly, a sound that was both relief and recognition. Reeves' eyes filled with tears. He had trained K9s for years. He had never witnessed anything like this. The child had not only reached into the dog's memory, she had healed a piece of it. The judge, finally regaining composure, cleared his throat. "The court will take note of the child's statements and the extraordinary circumstances surrounding this testimony. We will proceed with caution." But the courtroom knew, everyone knew, something had changed irreversibly. Even the defense attorney's voice trembled as he spoke again. "Your Honor, the truth of that night, the dog's experience, the child's insight, they cannot be ignored. Whatever judgment is made here, it will be informed by a bond that transcends ordinary understanding." Reeves remained crouched beside Rex, hand over the dog's neck. "I never understood," he whispered. "Not fully, until now." Smiled faintly. "I understood, I knew." And in that moment, the courtroom held its collective breath once more, not for the trial, not for the law, but for a bond no one could explain. A memory resurrected, a trauma recognized, and a truth that had been hidden in the dark finally brought into the light. The gavel hit the bench. Reeves flinched. Everyone paused, but the world had changed. That 3-year-old child and the police dog had spoken a truth that no law, no report, no protocol could erase. Outside, the storm had passed, but inside, the storm had just begun. Because what had unearthed was only the beginning. And not everyone would be ready for what came next. The courtroom was quiet, almost reverent, as everyone waited for the final proceedings to begin. Sat beside her mother, small fingers intertwined with Sarah's, eyes wide but calm. Beside Officer Reeves, Rex rested on the polished floor, head low but alert, muscles relaxed for the first time in months. The air was thick with anticipation, a mixture of awe, disbelief, and the heavy weight of truth finally recognized. Judge Hammond, a man who had spent decades commanding order, leaned forward on the bench, his gavel still clenched in his hand. He took a deep breath, glancing first then at Rex, then at the assembled courtroom. "This court has witnessed something extraordinary," he began, his voice measured but tinged with awe. "A child's testimony has revealed not only events that were hidden from official record, but also a truth that speaks beyond words, beyond reports, and even beyond what we thought we could comprehend." Murmurs swept through the courtroom. Jurors exchanged glances. Everyone understood that what had transpired here was unprecedented. The defense attorney rose, voice steady but urgent. "Your Honor, the child's observations are undeniable. She has articulated the trauma of this dog, which has remained unacknowledged for months. I ask that this testimony be formally recognized, and that the dog's history, his injuries, and his experience be fully considered in this case." The prosecutor, usually composed and precise, looked visibly shaken. She rose slowly. "Your Honor, extraordinary though it may be, the child's testimony provides insight that goes beyond normal witness accounts. While unconventional, it cannot be dismissed. The child has revealed a truth that the court must acknowledge. Reeves felt a lump in his throat. Years of following procedure, of enforcing rules, of commanding Rex through training and protocol, all of it had led to this moment. And yet, no procedure could capture what a 3-year-old child had just done. Unlocked a hidden memory, healed trauma, and communicated in a language no one else could understand. Shifted slightly, leaning forward, she looked at Rex and whispered, "It's okay now, you're safe." Rex's amber eyes glimmered. He let out a soft exhale, a sound that carried relief, recognition, and gratitude. Reeves knelt beside him, pressing a hand to the dog's neck. "You did it, boy," he murmured. "You trusted her and she trusted you." The judge's voice rang again, firm but thoughtful. "Given the extraordinary circumstances, the court will formally recognize the child's observations regarding the dog's trauma and prior experiences. While we proceed with legal matters, it is clear that both human and animal have experienced and endured events that demand acknowledgement beyond written reports." A low murmur ran through the courtroom. The jurors' eyes were wide. Some dabbed at tears they didn't even realize had formed. The reality of the child's role and the bond she had forged with Rex was undeniable. Sarah whispered softly to, "Baby, you were amazing, you helped him." Nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I had to, he needed me." Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed. Social media exploded with clips and quotes. 3-year-old child unlocks police dog's trauma. Toddler recalls hidden events from K-9 unit case. Child and dog communicate beyond words. News anchors replayed the moment where had pointed at Rex's scars and spoken the words, "He hurt. I saw it." Millions were captivated by the extraordinary story, a small child bridging the gap between human and animal memory and uncovering a hidden truth that adults had overlooked. Back in the courtroom, Reeves knelt beside Rex one last time before the session ended. "You're safe now, boy. No more secrets. No more hiding." Rex leaned gently against Reeves' leg, resting his head on the officer's knee. The dog had endured pain, fear, and uncertainty. But thanks to a tiny child, that trauma was finally recognized, validated, and understood. Meanwhile stood beside her mother, her small hand brushing against Rex's thick fur. "He's brave," she said softly. "I knew he could be." The judge banged the gavel one final time. Court adjourned. But the story didn't end there. Over the following weeks, the story captured hearts nationwide. News outlets aired the clips repeatedly. Animal behaviorists, psychologists, and law enforcement officials all weighed in, calling's connection to Rex miraculous and unexplainable by conventional science. Scholars debated how a 3-year-old could access a memory from a dog, a memory that had never been recorded, never reported, never spoken of publicly. Meanwhile, Reeves and Rex returned to work, but something had changed. The bond between officer and dog, always strong, had deepened in ways words could not describe, and became a quiet legend in their lives. Every time she visited, Rex would respond with that same amber gaze, recognition, trust, and gratitude shining through. One rainy afternoon, Sarah whispered to Reeves, "I don't know how she did it. I don't know how a child could remember, feel, see." Reeves smiled, a mixture of exhaustion and awe. "I don't know either, but she healed him, and somehow she helped me too." Sitting on the edge of Reeves' car, leaned toward Rex, whispering softly, "You're safe. You're never alone." The German shepherd nuzzled her hand gently, a low, contented whine escaping. It was a sound of completion, of understanding, of a bond forged in the darkness and now illuminated by trust. Reeves stood, looking down at the two. He realized that some stories, some truths, cannot be measured by law, procedure, or even experience. Some truths exist in memory, connection, and compassion, across species, across ages, and across worlds no one expected to intersect. small yet wise beyond her years, had bridged that gap. She had reminded a dog of his courage, acknowledged his pain, and given him the chance to heal. And in doing so, she had reminded the world of something far more profound. Sometimes, the smallest voices carry the deepest truths. Rex barked softly, not as a command or warning, but as a greeting, a confirmation, a celebration of survival and trust. Laughed, a pure, light, and unshakable sound. Reeves exhaled slowly, feeling weight and wonder in equal measure. The courtroom, the media, the nation, they would talk about it for years. But for Reeves, Rex, Sarah, and it wasn't about fame or headlines or accolades. It was about recognition, healing, and connection. And in the eyes of a 3-year-old girl and a wounded police dog, justice had been served. Because some truths are beyond words, some bonds are beyond understanding. And some heroes don't wear badges, they just see. The end.